What's your thought on youth soccer and where it's headed?
I see kids that are a lot more talented nowadays than when I was a kid, but at what cost?
When you're playing against him, do you ever kind of sit back and go, oh my gosh, that's Messi out there?
When you're playing him, there's zero time for that whatsoever, and it's all about making sure you know where he's at.
At what point did the dream start?
It was about finding that ability to compete and practice and train, but not kill it by overdoing it.
But who are a few of the coaches that kind of got the most out of you?
You need people around you to believe in you, not just think about it as business.
You got a little taste of MLS, then you went to Europe. Tell us about just the differences between the two cultures.
The atmosphere in the stadium was electric, was fantastic. But then there'd be days when you're getting harassed by supporters.
If you can get Brad on the field to meet Messi sometime,
Yeah, I'm sure it's an easy thing to do.
After they threw me in the net, he always won one.
Before we get to the podcast, if you have middle school or high school kids that play sports and you don't want to fundraise like me, we got you covered. My buddy Chris Carneal owns Booster. Chris?
We help schools and sports teams raise funds in a super fun and engaging way. In fact, the last 22 years, we've raised $750 million, and we can't wait to help you. Choose booster.com.
Welcome back to Pure Athlete. I am Jeff, along with Britt and Brad, and happy Easter. Did y'all have a good Easter?
That was a great Easter. Yeah. Brad's still doing Easter with his pink.
This is exactly what I wore yesterday to church. I had to, just kind of back to back a little bit. Laundry's kind of behind.
We got a great episode today, but before we get into it, I got to ask your opinion on all the stuff that happened with the Braves and Acuna and Snit and Kelnick. What are your thoughts?
Well, you know me, I do not say much a lot of time, but one thing we talk about this, and most of the guests we have on, the number one thing they talk about is being a great teammate. If you're a great teammate, no matter what happens, blah, 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 you know what? That's what's most important and what your girls or guys on your team will talk about. And I just saw Ronald Acuna just throw a teammate under the bus. And my biggest problem with that is you make it all about yourself, what you're doing. The team has struggled. And those 26 guys in there are busting it. Y'all know this. Y'all both called me. What's wrong with the team? What's going on?
We're dying.
Exactly. And here they are, 21 games into the year?
Yeah.
And so those 26 guys are busting their tail, trying to get better. They finally have a nice weekend, right?
He's not even there.
And he's not there. He's out in LA, and you're going to throw a teammate under the bus. Yeah. And then you look at it, it's like, Ronald, when he played, he did this numerous times and got warned. And so when you want to talk about context, Jared Kelnick, if you've watched him at any time, always is diving for balls, always playing hard, always doing this. And you talk about poor timing to throw a tweet out and bury a teammate when the team's going.
Finally hits a winning streak.
100%. And what are all the players talking about yesterday? Instead of, hey, we're hitting with runners in scoring position, we're bullpen's doing really well. Instead, they're talking about that.
And Kelnick owned it.
And Kelnick owned it. He went in and sat in Snit's office for 20 minutes and cried and apologized. So it just was frustrating to see that. And even more reason when you're coaching your son or daughter, they're on a team, when we talk about be a good teammate. Doesn't take a lot to be a good teammate.
Yeah, this is a great opportunity for parents to use this story to talk about.
Absolutely. It's a great, exactly. And then, of course, he deleted the tweet. That always makes me even more mad. Like, if you're going to say it, own it and say it. So
well, we could go on about this for a while, but we do have a guest here.
We do.
In studio.
One that is a great teammate.
Yeah,
exactly.
And so for me as a Clemson guy, I gotta say he's 2-year All-American at University of South Carolina. And he was the goalie for the U.S. Olympic team or World Cup team in 2008, I think. He's as old as I am, so we're throwing some dates back there. But what's cool is he is the goaltender for our Atlanta United right here, of course, won the championship and really put soccer on the map.
Well, we don't have too many championships in this city, so we really value this championship.
Yeah, you think about it. If outside of the Georgia Bulldogs, since 95, you pretty much have the Braves and the Atlanta United when you're talking about this. So,
and you said he's as old as you, but he's not retired.
No, he's not. He's still playing. He's actually in much better shape than I am.
I think
but he's not getting to golf as much as me. I promise you that. But Brad Guzan, thanks for coming on with us.
Absolutely. Absolute pleasure, guys. Well, I appreciate the warm welcome. Sometimes I certainly feel my age and feel, mornings I wake up and I'm thinking, is this the day where it all crumbles and falls apart? But extremely lucky to be able to still be doing what I'm doing, and really happy to be joining you guys today.
Well, I got to ask you first. You have a great Easter? I know you got back late from Philly.
Yep. It was a great Easter. It really was. Got back early in the early hours in the morning. My wife, as I was mentioning to you guys, she had laid out some 75 eggs for our 4 kids, and there I was at 3:00 in the morning scattering Easter eggs around our yard. But it was a great Easter. Quiet, nothing crazy. Nice food, and so it was a good day.
Awesome. Well, I know we thank you so much, man, for joining us. I know it's the season. I know you're asked to do a lot of things, but I think it's cool that you did. I know you have 4 kids, and as you said, you're starting to get into that. So just tell us a little bit about your family dynamic and your kids' ages.
Yeah, as I said, we've got 4 kids, and my wife's a saint. She does it all. Obviously, with my schedule, managing, being in and out of town, and here, there, everywhere. But then, of course, there I am, putting all of our kids in all the different activities and giving them all the experiences. And she's like, how am I meant to be in 4 different places at once? And so I have to tip my hat to her, and without her, we wouldn't be doing it. But they're 10, 8, 5, and 3, or 5.5, as our 5-year-old likes to say. And so we're just getting into the youth sports scene and all the activities and all the crazy schedules and going here, there, everywhere. But they love it. And for me, that's the most important part. The moment they come to me and say, hey, Dad, I don't want to do this and I don't want to do that. It's like, no problem. We'll find something else to do, and as long as we're not sat in front of a TV and sat in front of an iPad and whatnot. And it doesn't matter if it's a sport, if it's an activity, if it's whatever it is, as long as they're having fun and they're doing it with a smile on their face. That's what I'm all about.
That's cool.
Well, that's awesome. We're going to dive into some of that parenting stuff here in just a little bit. But before we do that, we want to hear a little more about your journey. As Jeff mentioned that you played at South Carolina, but let's go back a little further from that. And tell us about your childhood and playing sports and how did all that start?
Yeah, grew up in Chicago, outside the southwest suburbs of Chicago.
Cubs or White Sox?
Being a Southside guy was more White Sox, but I'll be honest, we were never down at the park. It was never like we would get there on the occasional time, throughout the season and whatnot. Probably now I would lean more towards the Cubs just because my buddy's a season ticket holder for the Cubs, and he's all about it.
And they're winning.
Correct. That certainly helps. A lot less drama going on over on the north side as opposed to the south side. But no, I grew up playing baseball. Was terrible at it, but I played basketball and I played soccer. And I played all those sports up until probably 12 or 13. And at that point, had to start to make a decision just because, my parents we were in Wisconsin on a Saturday and St. Louis on a Sunday. And my mom and dad were saying, hey, listen, we can't be doing this. This is getting crazy. And so at that point decided to go with soccer and stuck with it. But yeah, youth sports for me, it was everything. It was everything. I love to play. I love to be out there with my friends. I love to compete. When I got to high school, that's when, especially in the Midwest, that's when the soccer schedule was starting to change. And they were saying, okay, instead of playing for your high school, we're going to start introducing club and travel soccer all year round. And I remember saying straight away to my parents, I don't want that. I don't want to play that. I want to play for my school, and I want to play in front of my friends on Friday night lights and under, on the football stadium. And so I get goosebumps telling that, right? Because that's as a kid, that was for me, that was a cool experience. And so played high school, and then from there, ultimately ended up at South Carolina. I didn't play as a goalkeeper until I went to college. And so I was an outfield player, as a midfielder. I was always the biggest guy in the field. I was never the fastest.
Did you
but
play in practice or anything? Or
I would,
not?
I would practice. I would train as a goalie, but I wasn't. As an outfield player, as a midfielder, I was utilized there, and our team had a decent goalie at the time, and it wasn't a knock against me. It was how can I help the team, and I could best help the team as a midfielder, and just kind of being this nuisance on the field, and this hard playing kid that was bigger than everyone else, and so.
Is that normal? I mean, do most goalies play goalie from very early?
They're starting to. Certainly they're certainly starting to. And for me, I think that was probably one of the areas that really helped me develop as a goalkeeper. And that's playing the field, understanding what my teammates were going through in the last 5-10 minutes of the game. They've been running all over the field, and they're tired. And there I am in the back saying, "Hey guys, can you run a little faster? Can you
get down here and help?"
Exactly.
They're
Can we defend a little bit more? And so I had an experience in knowing what they're going through. So now the way I'm speaking to them and communicating them in games, it's a little bit different, saying, "Hey, listen, I know you're struggling, but I need 5 minutes. Give me 5 minutes, everything you got." And, so it changes the psychology and what I'm thinking in terms of how do I approach my teammates and how do I help them and ultimately help the team. And so, it was a time that really helped me develop as a goalkeeper and play at the next level.
Did the schools recruiting you, did they look at you as a goalie, or they look at you as a defenseman?
So I wasn't being recruited heavily at all. And there were some small D2, D3 schools as a defenseman. And then I was a late addition to a camp. It was like, All-Star camp, if you will, for lack of a better term. Top 100, 150 kids. And they said, "Okay, we have a spot. Okay, this kid from Chicago, boom." I get invited the week before. A lot of youth national team players. I go down there, have the best week of my career at the time as a goalkeeper. And they're like, "Who is this kid? Where did he come from? Why have we not heard about this kid?" Was given, the award of best goalkeeper during the camp. And within 2 days, all these schools were calling, and it was, and at that point, that's when things kind of exploded in a good way. And I was like, "Oh, Mom and Dad, what do we do here?" And so then it's like, letters started coming, calls started coming. And then I was like, "Okay, now we're in it."
What do you think would have happened if you did not go to that camp? Where do you think you would have ended up?
I don't know. Good, really good question. For me, I always wanted to play soccer at a high level. There was an article in our local, newspaper when I was in high school, and it was like, what's your goal? What's your dream? And ultimately, I ended up doing this interview with the newspaper, and it was, I want to play over for a big club in Europe and play overseas and play soccer, and ultimately was able to live that goal and live that dream. And I don't ever take that for granted, because I know there's a lot of people both in the sports world and out of it that don't get to live their dream. And so I never take that for granted. But where would I be? I don't know. I would like to think that I would somehow find a way and find a path. But I don't know what that path would have looked like.
He'd have been putting out Easter eggs at 9 o'clock at night, not 3 in the morning.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's probably, I don't know where, but
You only stayed 2 years at South Carolina, so you did pretty well, I guess, once you figured out how to play.
He didn't
goal.
like the college. He knew South
really wanted to be
Carolina.
To be honest, and going back, right? So South Carolina was my third visit, and the next week I was supposed to go to Clemson. And so, and I'm pretty sure the coach at South Carolina knew that. And so, sure enough, I get back to Chicago Sunday night after a weekend visit. He calls Monday and was like, "Hey, we need an answer." And I'm like, "I can't give you an answer." I was like, "I just got back last night." And he's like, "All right, no problem. I'll give you some time to think about it." Tuesday calls. We need an answer. And I was like, "What?" And so little bit of pressure, and not really.
You don't want you stepping on
exactly.
that campus
And so then
how beautiful it is.
So then Wednesday I had a call, and the coach is no longer with us, but I had to call him and say, "I've made my decision." And I called after school on that Wednesday. He wasn't happy. He wasn't in the office, but he called back Thursday. Now, granted, I'm supposed to leave in 2 days to go to Clemson. he was not happy whatsoever and left a voicemail on the house phone so long that the voicemail cut him off, and he was just giving it to me and just
Typical.
ripping me a new one. And
That's how we do it at Clemson.
and so then he calls back and says, I wasn't done, with the message, and kept going.
Wow.
And I was like, yeah, all right.
That's where you probably also realize this is a business.
Yo, absolutely,
Right? Like,
100%.
I'm in a new game.
And so yeah, it I went in my freshman year, wasn't expecting to play. Outside circumstances, here I am. I'm playing and had a good freshman season.
Could you beat Clemson?
I think my freshman year, I think we did. Sophomore year, not so much. But there's a few guys within the U.S. soccer organization that like to, they get their digs in.
Yeah.
That are Clemson guys that we go back and forth with. But yeah, and then after my sophomore year, as long as I was to stay healthy, they were saying, you'll have an opportunity to go into the draft, and that was it.
So does it work? How does it work in college soccer in terms of like can you go at any time into the draft, or is it like you have to stay a certain amount of time?
No, you can go at any time, and
Okay.
and I mean there were kids. So then the soccer season in college is in the fall. The draft was in January, and so at that point, then you don't even have to go to college. So there was Freddie Adu back in the day when I was he was 14 years old. There's a guy up in Philadelphia. I think he's 15 or 14 or 15. I mean, these kids are closer to my kids' age than they are me.
When I was with the Braves, we played. That's when the first 3 years the Nats played at RFK Stadium.
Yeah,
where
yeah.
DC United played. And I remember walking. Their locker room was down from the Braves or from the visiting locker room, and Freddie Adu was there. He was 14. He was there when I was there, and I remember thinking, I'm like, this kid looks like he's 10.
For sure.
He's playing Major League Soccer.
He was
It
playing
crazy.
against men, and it's soccer is obviously a contact sport, and you're saying to a 14-year-old, regardless of how good you are, you're going up and competing.
You're gonna get knocked.
Yeah, you're competing against men that are fighting to put food on the table for their family, and they're like, this is my last chance, and he's looking at it with, well, I've got the world is my oyster.
Yeah.
20 years left.
Yeah, you know what I mean.
Exactly.
So it's pretty crazy.
Oh man.
So you got a little taste of the MLS, and then you went to Europe.
Yeah.
And so tell us about just the differences between. I mean, obviously, MLS has grown so much recently, but back then, or just kind of just the differences between the two cultures.
Yeah.
The fans, the speed of the game, the talent. Just talk about that.
For sure. I mean, when you think about the sport of soccer, you think globally, right? And we're at the infant stages of the sport here in the United States. And when you think and you look at soccer, whether it's in Europe or South America or Asia, anywhere really outside of North America or outside the U.S., it's huge. It's life. It's everything to the fans, to the supporters, and it's something that's passed down from generation to generation. And it's like, hey, you're not going to be able to choose who you support. It's you're supporting this team because your grandfather supported them, I support them, and now you're going to support them, and you're just going to carry on in the family business of supporting this team and this club. And so, as I mentioned, the goal for me was always to go to Europe and get a taste of that and experience it. And I was very fortunate enough, and I had to go through a work permit qualifying process, and ultimately was granted a work permit. And so was over there in England at Aston Villa, and when I remember getting there and I was thinking, I was just like a kid in a candy store. I was like, this is the best feeling. This is unbelievable. But then I quickly realized, okay, I'm going to need to step up here. And otherwise it's going to be a quick stop, and I'm going to be back on a plane going back to North America. So, it was an unbelievable experience. When you talk about the fans and the supporters, there would be games where, obviously the atmosphere in the stadium was electric, was fantastic. But then there'd be days when it wasn't so great and our performance wasn't so good. You'd be walking down the street just trying to get dinner, and like you're getting harassed by supporters. And, at that point it was just my wife and myself. And so trying to go for dinner or whatnot. And you quickly realize when you didn't win, when you weren't having a good game,
You take
you
out.
stay inside. Exactly.
Seriously.
You stay in and you order out, and you're not walking around town. That's for sure.
Did you get any pushback as far as going over there? And it's so hard, right? Because I know what you're saying. The goal is that was the Premier League, that was everything. But we're trying to grow the game here in America, right?
For sure. And I wouldn't say it was pushback. It was because at the same time we're trying to grow the national team, and
for sure.
And so the U.S. team, right? You want your players playing at the highest level, competing against the best, being in the best environment. And so from that sense, the national team coach at the time, he was extremely supportive. And just because you go over there doesn't mean you're going to play right away. And that was certainly the case for me. I wasn't playing regularly. I was in the environment. I was in that, that type of learning environment, but at the same time, competition was unbelievable, whether it be individually for places on the team itself, in the starting 11, or just being in that environment of competing at that level week in, week out. And so he was extremely supportive of me going. And when you have the backing of someone like that saying, hey, listen, we understand what you're going through. That's, you still need to try and figure things out because we want you playing. But at the same time, don't overthink it that you're not playing there and now you want to come back to America. And there's something to be said for determination, for grit, and saying, right, I'm gonna fight this thing out and see what happens at the end of it.
We talk a lot on the show about influential coaches,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sure from South Carolina to wherever, who were a couple coaches, and even over there, Atlanta United, wherever, but who are a few of the coaches that kind of got the most out of you, and why? Why were they so influential?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you talk about coaches, right, especially at a young age, you talk about people that are helping you along, but at the same time holding you accountable and demanding more from you. And they believe in you, but at the same time they know that you've got more to offer. And before I went to Europe, there was a goalkeeping coach at Chivas USA, the first MLS team that I played with, and his name was Zach Abdel, and his technique and his methods were outrageous. And I was just like, what am I doing here? I was like, this is crazy. And it proved to me, and it showed me that there's no right or wrong way to get to where you want it. There's not one path to get to where you want to go. And so he was one that he believed in me, and he was like, you could do more. Yes, you're better than this, push yourself, sort of thing. And so he was the one that really gave me that confidence to say, okay, I can play at this level, because it is a daunting task when you go into a professional environment saying, am I going to make it? Am I good enough to be here? You have those self-doubts, and you need people around you to believe in you, and not just think about it as a business, but think about the players as individuals and as people ultimately. And then going, like I said, going over to Europe, there was a goalkeeping coach. Again, when I first got there, I talked about having to go through the work permit process. Originally, I was over there in January, and I was denied a work permit on the last day of the transfer window of January 31st. The manager went down to the hearing, was denied because I hadn't met the qualification for the amount of national team games that you needed. And obviously, Tim Howard was playing he was at Man United at the time. So he's playing week in and week out. And so I wasn't naturally, I wasn't going to have the amount of games I needed to play from the national team. And he said, "Oh, don't worry, we're going to come back in for you in the summer." And I'm thinking, yeah, no chance, because this is the Premier League, one of 20 teams. This is a huge club, and they can literally find players worldwide. And so they can go get anybody they want. So then mentally, I went back to LA, and I was with Chivas, and I wasn't playing great. My head was all over the spot, all over the place in terms of mentally, am I going to go? 3 days ago, I had my bags packed, and I thought I was moving to England, and now I'm back here, and I got to play here, but I want to be there. And it was a bit of a mess. and they're telling me, "Oh, don't worry." But at the same time, I'm like, I'm worried
Yeah,
here. I was like, my dream is
I've
gonna
been waiting.
is gonna go up in smoke. And so, sure enough, in the summer they came back in, and I was like, man, I was like, one, they were true to their word, and two, I ultimately got my work permit that summer, and that was a guy that he believed in me again in terms of, hey, you can compete at this level, you can make it over here. And even when I would play and I wouldn't have the best of games, he was like, no problem, shake it off and on to the next one. And so, I was very fortunate that to have those types of coaches that believed in me as an individual, as a person, and ultimately as a soccer player. So yeah, to have that support, it goes a long way.
That leads me into thanks for sharing that. I had no idea. I mean, you talk about having your bags packed,
Yeah.
ready to go. So we talk a lot on here too about, young boys, young girls not getting their way, not making the team they want, having to develop what you said a little bit ago, grit. It's one of our 5 pillars here at Pure Athlete. So for you, that 6-month process, right? Like, where did you find the determination? Where did you turn to get through that adversity until finally you got what you wanted?
Yeah, I turned to my support staff, and my family, my coaches, my teammates. I was a young pro. I'd been playing professional for 3 years. And at that point, obviously I'm still learning the game. I'm learning myself. And I'm in this environment, in this locker room with senior pros, guys that are now head coaches of national teams, head coaches of Major League Soccer teams. And I'm in this locker room, and I'm like, well, let me pick their brains. Let me talk to them and let me see what they have to say. And just being around a group of people, like I said, whether it's my family, the coaches, or players, my teammates, just having that support system around me to say, yeah, calm down, don't panic. It's not the end of the world. Get back to what you know. And at that time, it was about competing. It was about going out, training hard, and proving my worth day in and day out. Not only to the people, obviously, over at Aston Villa in the Premier League, but ultimately proving my worth to my teammates on a daily basis, and convincing them, saying, "Hey, you guys all know what had just happened, right?
Yeah.
It's no secret. It was out there in the press and whatnot. It was no secret. But I'm committed to you guys. I'm in this, whether it's 6 months or 12 months or whatever it may be. I'm in it, and you guys can count on me to be a good teammate and be in this locker room and be present, because I owed that to my teammates. I owed that to my coaches. Although I had a personal setback of my goals and my dreams, that at the same time, I couldn't allow that to affect how I was as a teammate in that current locker room.
Love that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So Brad, I want to jump back to your journey as a kid. And so you're talking about your dream here. At what point did the dream start? How early did you have that dream? And then, there are a lot of kids today who have that dream. What does it take for a kid to make it?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was I started playing soccer. As I said, I was always a big kid. I was always tall. I've got 2 older brothers, and so I was always getting dragged along to their sports and their activities, and so I started playing soccer at an early age. I think I was 3.5 years old, and I was playing, running around, and then ultimately, I think that dream for me of wanting to play professional probably took place somewhere 10, 10, 11, 12, somewhere in there. And I was like, oh, this would be really cool, because back then you couldn't watch soccer games on TV, right? As easy as you can now. And all these different, streaming,
Oh,
avenues
yeah.
and whatnot. You can get games worldwide, snap of your finger. And so back then you couldn't. And so I would rush home from school, and try and catch the last 5-10 minutes of Champions League games, because those were being played a little bit later over in Europe. And so I would be able to catch the last 5-10 minutes. And that's what kind of kickstarted that goal and that dream of going over there. And, I think, as I mentioned, there's no one path. There's no one set way. So what's going to work for you may not work for me. And, same thing, right? You've got to find what works for you. And for me, it was playing numerous sports because I loved being out there with my friends and my teammates, and I loved baseball. And if it was possible to be able to be in, two states in one weekend,
Yeah.
then I think I would have stayed with it a little bit longer. But um, it was about finding that ability to compete and practice and train, but not kill it by overdoing it. And I say that because I was still able to go and hang out with my friends and play backyard football and go swimming in the summer and go on vacation. And we would do these things throughout my childhood that still allowed me to love the sport. And ultimately, I think when you look at what does it take, yes, you need to have skill. Yes, you need to have a drive and a desire to want to get better. But you also need a little bit of luck. And I certainly had that along the way. And again, I was never the best growing up as a kid. I was never in the youth national team setup. I was never looked upon as, oh, this guy is the first name on the team sheet. It was always, yeah, he's got a good attitude. Okay, works hard. Yeah, I can see some potential there. Let's see if we can develop him and work with him and whatnot. And for me, that was more than enough because I wanted as much information as I could of how to get better, but what do I need to do to get better? And just taking that information on board and going out and trying to accomplish just that.
What role did your parents play in all that? How influential were they in choosing the path of soccer? And
They were not influential at all in terms of choosing my path. They were influential in terms of supporting me in whatever I wanted to do. And so they were never saying, hey, are you going to go out and train for another hour after practice? For my mom and dad, especially my mom, it was all about school. It was all about grades. And if I didn't keep my grades up, then I wasn't going to practice. I wasn't going to games. My dad was working 2 jobs. And so it was right. If schoolwork's not done, you're not going to practice and whatnot. And so they were extremely supportive in terms of just being there for me as a son, and allowing me to say, hey, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? These are the options. And this is this is what's possible, And so that was huge. They never put any sort of pressure on me to make one decision over another. They never put any sort of pressure on me to say, you need to go out and practice more, or, hey, guess what? You weren't great today in that game. And now we're going to throw 50 extra pitches in the backyard, or we're going to go practice passing or shooting or whatever on a goal. It was never like that whatsoever. It was all about enjoyment. It was all about supporting me. And for that, I'm forever thankful.
Brad, when you were like sitting there in those stadiums or standing in those stadiums on the pitch at the Olympics, at 2 World Cups, did you have time to reflect on just the journey and how you talked about, like, you weren't the guy who was supposed to be the chosen one. And here you are at the pinnacle of soccer. Did you have a chance, or were you just so focused on the moment?
I was, that's when I look back and we talk about being, an older statesman and an older head now. And I look back and that's probably the one regret. I don't think I cherished those moments enough. I mean, my memory is terrible as it is. And so, to remember last week is a challenge.
It's not going to get better.
Yeah. And so when I look back at those moments, especially being in those moments, it's like, man, I wish I would have journaled. I wish I would have just taken note of those feelings, those emotions. The first time that I played for the U.S. team, we played in Dallas, in Frisco. It was in 2006. That was my first camp. I think we played Guatemala. It was cold in Dallas at the end or the beginning of February. It was freezing, actually. But I remember that moment when the anthem came on, and I'm stood there with my hand on my heart over the U.S. badge, over the crest, and I'm thinking, and I remember this is the one moment I do remember from throughout my career, and I remember standing there as the anthem's playing, and I'm thinking to myself, this is unbelievable. I'm like, to be able to represent this country in this moment on this stage, and I couldn't have been more thankful and appreciative of that experience, because when you think about how vast this country is and the amount of kids that can be
Want to be
chosen,
doing
yeah,
that.
like
Yeah.
how did I end up here? I'm just a kid from southwest suburbs of Chicago, like normal Joe Schmo, and here I am out on the field listening to the U.S. national anthem before the U.S. game is about to take place, and I'm going to play in goal. And that moment, it gives me chills, because it was, to have that moment, it was surreal.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's pretty cool. You talk about the MLS, how much it's grown lately. What is it like now seeing guys like Messi and other people actually coming over here to play?
Yeah, it's amazing, right? Because first and foremost, I'm a fan of the game.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of the sport. I want the sport to do well in this country. To be a part of it in 2005, 2008, to see the growth from then to where it is now. It's been an astronomical, increase in terms of support, in terms of notoriety, in terms of coverage. It's been unbelievable to witness, and then to be a part of it is even cooler. And when you mention the players that you mentioned in terms of how big their profiles are, and they're saying, yeah, I want to go to North America, and I want to be there to help grow this thing and grow this league. I remember being in LA when David Beckham first joined the Galaxy, right? And so he was out there and playing against him, and you're like, this is like rock star status type of stuff, and this is global sensation, and you're getting coverage in the UK and South America, and it's all about Major League Soccer. But then when you increase the quality of the league to where we are now it's not just about, said one player. It's not just about, a name on the back of the shirt. It's about the name on the front of the shirt, in terms of, Atlanta United getting 47,000 fans, week in and week out. And then when we open it, we're getting 80,000. And this support this is world soccer support. This is, you go to South America, you go to Europe. These are real attendance in terms of numbers, in terms of atmosphere that's being generated and created. And when you have that, it's pretty special, especially when you look back on where the league was.
My dad loved soccer, and I remember him. We went to a game in 17 or 18, and that was what he said. He's lived here in Atlanta since he graduated college. He said, I never would imagine there'd be 78,000 people watching a soccer game in Atlanta.
Unbelievable.
I remember the opening day at Bobby Dodd Stadium.
Yeah.
Yep.
And, you didn't know what to expect. And, it's a college football town. It's a baseball town. I've never seen anything like that. I've never seen anything like that first year there, and then obviously the second year was unbelievable. But you mentioned celebrities, and we got to mention the name Messi. This guy was kind of, speaking of celebrities, Apple had the MLS documentary.
Yeah,
they focused on Atlanta one episode, which was great. You got a lot of airtime, but great story about just overcoming. You guys were down, struggling during the season. You get a matchup against Miami. And just talk about your feelings going to that match and that series, and just talking about facing the world's best player. And just obviously you had an amazing series and pulled off probably the greatest upset in MLS history. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it was amazing, right? Because you play the game at this level to put yourself up against the best, right? Whether it's an individual or collectively as a team. And you want to challenge yourself. You want to say, all right, where am I at? Where do I fall in the spectrum right now? And, so then we get the matchup with Miami, and you're thinking, okay, nobody's giving us a chance. We barely get into the playoffs. Now, the prize for getting into the playoffs is you get to play Messi and Inter Miami. And, ultimately they had one of the best seasons ever. And you're like, ooh, okay, our backs are against the wall, but no problem. Let's go out there. Let's duke it out and see where the chips fall. And so we'll leave it be. And so we go out there. Game one down there doesn't go our way in terms of the result. But I remember after that first game, we were thinking, the performance wasn't bad, and we had our chances. They had their chances, but the performance wasn't bad. And if we do that, I think we give ourselves a chance, especially at home, especially with 80,000 behind us. It's gonna be pretty sweet. And so come back to Atlanta, and obviously it's close game throughout the 90 minutes, and we end up scoring the winner. I think either right before 90 minutes or right after, and the roof, blows right off. And I remember looking around, and in that, you talk about appreciating moments. And as I've gotten older, I appreciate these moments. Right. And I'm like, so there I am, I'm on the field, everyone's celebrating down there, and I'm just looking around like,
That's cool.
damn, this is pretty sweet. This is cool. So I'm looking around, I'm like, all right, cool. A couple more minutes. Let's make sure we win. We end up winning. Great. So now we go back to Miami. And again, everyone's like, oh, Atlanta pulled off a fluke win.
Cute story.
Yeah. And like Atlanta pulled off, a fluke win. It's, whatever. It's Miami's going to go down Miami. They're going to crush them. It'll be fine. And then we go down there, have a good game. And I thought where you were going with the story was the whole net situation and get pushed into the net.
Meme, yeah.
I've becoming a social media meme. And, but ultimately we got the last laugh. And,
I was talking about how many saves you had in that series.
Yeah.
So that was what's amazing.
But again, that was part of it. And when, we always talk about goalkeepers being almost like a goalkeepers union, right? All the goalies on the team, 2, 3, 4 guys, it's a team within a team. And so our job is to save the ball. Our job is to give those 10 guys in front of us an opportunity to go and win the game for us. And on that day, I was able to make a few saves and give our guys the opportunity to do just that. And, regardless of becoming a social media meme, like I said, we got the last laugh. And afterwards, I think, there were a lot of unhappy people probably within the league, within Apple. They're like,
100%.
what the heck is going on down there? Like, geez. But it's one of those where you get a smile on your face because you're like, yeah, nobody gave us a chance. Everyone was doubting us.
And there's no better feeling.
Yeah,
when you
exactly.
do that.
And we rose to the challenge as a group, as a team. And I remember in the locker room afterwards, and Arthur was in there with us, and it was a moment that you're like, yeah, this is pretty sweet. And so when you have those moments, you cherish those. And as I mentioned, as I've gotten older, I've tried to just make a mental note of, yeah, this is pretty awesome.
One last question about Messi. I'll maybe ask 2 questions about Messi. One is, what makes him so good? And 2 is, when you're playing against him, do you ever kind of sit back and go, oh my gosh, that's Messi out there and he's really, really good? Are you so much focused on your strategy? But do you ever just sit back and watch?
So two answers. When he's on TV and he's playing against somebody else, you'll appreciate him a lot more in terms of what he's doing, his movements, how he sees the game, what he's not doing. Sometimes he's just standing still, but at the same time, he's always scanning, knowing what's around him. Yeah. When he gets the ball, boom, 1-touch pass, 40 yards, opposite direction, right on the money. And you're like, how did he even see that? And it's because he's constantly analyzing the game as it's happening around him. When you're playing him, there's zero time for that whatsoever. And it's all about making sure you know where he's at, making sure I'm communicating to my defender saying, hey, Messi left shoulder, this and that, because that's what he wants to float out of the game to then, oh yeah, he's not involved. And exactly. Yeah. And so then you lose focus on him for half a second, and that's all he needs. And so, you try to put guys in front of you in a position to help you defend against him. And it's funny, right? Because my oldest is now 10, and he, I made a couple saves and whatnot. And he's like, after the game, he's like, Dad, did you see Messi? He touched you after after that save, And I said, yeah, I know. He's like, are you guys friends? And I'm like, no, bud. I was like, that's not what that was. That was just like, in the moment. And he's like, okay, all right, that's cool. And I'm like, we're not friends. I don't have his phone number. He classifies everything as, if I have their phone number, then they're my friend, well, let's call them. So it's moments like that make you chuckle, and you appreciate the competitiveness of him, of myself, of team against team and in those moments. And there's certainly a respect level that when you are competing against, players such as himself in terms of what he's done for the game, what he still does for the game, what he does for the league, it's amazing.
Now that you're done fanboying on Messi tonight, can I get on with it?
Go ahead. I'm done.
I have time. Can I
No,
go?
it's okay. I hogged the conversation.
We'll let it slide. We'll let it
I
slide.
apologize.
Can you get Brad a jersey? I've lost my train of thought from we had we continue to, I feel like soccer, volleyball are two of they continue to grow so fast right now. We had Taylor Twellman on, who was just hilarious. I mean, you talk about a personality, right? And he was so good. Huh?
Not bashful.
Not bashful at all. But what are your thoughts on youth soccer today? Like what you see when you go see your kids or when you see someone else? What's your thought on youth soccer and where it's headed?
Yeah, it's certainly changed from when I was a kid. And I want to say for the better, but I'm not 100% sure because when I look at the environment that these kids go into, yes, they have more resources. Yes, they have the ability to get better, but at what cost? And I say that with the idea that the pressures are starting at a lot younger of an age in terms of putting these kids and saying to kids, hey, you've got to pick a sport at 8 years old, 9 years old. And I'm like, whoa. I was like, if that's what you're saying, this is not the place for my family and I, because I don't want that. And so when I look at youth soccer, I see kids that are a lot more talented nowadays than when I was a kid. But at the same time, I don't know if the end goal will be the same for them as it was for me in terms of making it to the highest level, not because of the talent, but because of all of the other outside factors of the pressures of being in an environment for so long at such an early age. And then the fear of a normal kid thinking I've missed out on a childhood, and so for me, I don't know if it's ultimately better. I don't know if it's an environment where it allows kids to flourish outside of soccer, where the environment that they're in is solely just about soccer. Whereas I think when I was a kid and growing up and playing new sports, it was all about being an individual, being a kid. And hey, by the way, I play baseball. I also play soccer. I play basketball. Now it's, hey,
that's my identity.
That's who I am. And at 10 years old, that shouldn't be the case.
Yeah. What does the U.S. have to do to get back to where I know it seems like we keep thinking we're so close to get back on that national or world level where we want to be?
Yeah, I mean, listen, when you talk about the national team, it's different than club soccer because you got guys playing all over the world, and some guys are playing at big clubs. And when I say big clubs, I'm talking big, globally, top clubs. And you've got other guys that aren't, and they're not playing regularly. And so I think you want representing that shirt with pride and representing that shirt with everything you have. And when you do that at that level, you're going to give yourself a chance, to be successful and win games and become really meaningful in terms of a team and as a country. And so the growth is there, but we need to be able to do it consistently and do that and have a real understanding of what it means to represent the U.S. in these big tournaments. Obviously, we've got the World Cup in 2026, and that will have all eyes on it. And
yeah, we got the semifinals right here in Atlanta.
Exactly. And so it's going to be really special. It's going to be really special. But do I think our national team is ever going to be compared to, say, Brazil or Argentina in terms of just the cultural side of it?
Yeah.
We're in a different country. We have a different makeup, and that's okay. As I talked about before, there's no one path to greatness. There's no one road that says this is what you must do. And we're a country that's just starting out in terms of growing the sport, and the sport is just starting to gain some traction. And we don't need to try and copy ourselves off of, Argentina or off of Brazil. I think we need to find find that identity that works for us within the United States.
Brad, we're bouncing around a little bit, but we said at the beginning we were going to ask you about being a sports parent.
Yeah.
So your oldest is 10.
Yep.
You got 4. So you're going to start getting into it more and more and more. So what is your approach as a sports parent for your kids? What do you want for their experience to be like?
So for me, my oldest does soccer, baseball, and basketball in the winter. And for him, and then my daughter, she does softball, basketball, gymnastics. Our 5-year-old does basketball, flag football, and baseball, just to put that out there. And so
Love it.
for me, what I say to them is, guys, I want you guys to have fun. And so with my oldest, him being the oldest, him obviously, our oldest 2 were both born in England, in London. And I don't want him to feel a pressure to say, I've got to do soccer because dad plays soccer. And so I tell him that all the time. I'm like, listen, dude, you can play whatever sports you want. If you tell me you like soccer, great, no problem. Then we'll do it. He likes playing goalie. I don't think he likes playing goalie because, okay, dad plays goalie. I think he likes playing goalie because he doesn't like to run.
Yeah.
And so he's like, oh yeah, I'll play.
Smart move.
I'll play goal. And I didn't figure that part out until I was a
No.
lot older. But I was
Smart
like,
move.
you figure that out at an early age. And so, but I tell him all the time, I said, I just want you to enjoy it. I want you to enjoy. I want you to be a good teammate, and with the baseball aspect comes that good teammate, especially in youth baseball. They've got the songs and the cheers and whatnot.
Walkout songs at 10 years old. Isn't it crazy?
And so, and my daughter, this is something we talk about when we're having dinner as a family. And my daughter would be like, she'll be singing these songs, and then they start having competitions of like, that's not how the song goes for our team. It goes this way. And I'm like, okay, as long as you guys are supporting your teammates, I don't mind it. But that's the biggest message is for them to enjoy and have fun. I want them to try and put their best foot forward. And the other day I said, oh, how did the game go? Baseball game. How did the game go? And he's like, oh, I got 2 walks and I struck out. I said, oh, okay. I said, did you strike out swinging or looking? He's like, I was swinging. I was like, awesome. I was like, good. I was like, I want you to try and hit the ball and whatnot, and he's like, and then he started saying something like, and this is where I not struggle, but I need to be better as a dad. And this is for all dads, right? But he was like, he started to say, yeah, but the umpire. And I said, stop right there. I said, I don't want to hear about the umpire. And he's like, well, and I said, I don't care if the strike zone was over your head and in the dirt. I said, it doesn't matter. And I said, it's about you, dude. It's about you. And it has, and he's like, and then of course, this is where I put my, my foot in my mouth. Cause then he goes, but then I see you talking to the referee all the time. And I'm like, oh gosh. I was like,
That's what we tell him. Yeah, your dad gets paid to do it.
Exactly.
Don't worry about it.
So I was like,
When you're my age.
correct.
Yeah.
And then I started
It's a
giving all
strategy,
those.
son. It's a strategy.
Exactly. And so not that I let that affect how I go to work and but at the same time, I now have a bigger emphasis on, hey, you've got a lot of young eyes, including your own kids, on you in these moments. And I need to be better.
That's awesome, man.
I'm curious what your mindset is at the end of a game, and it's going to be decided by penalty kicks. What's your approach? What's your mindset? Have you studied tendencies of the other guys? So
great question. My first reaction is, damn it, because all these 10 guys in front of me didn't use the time wisely enough to score another goal, So I'm like, this is all your guys' fault. No, it's a unique mentality because you try to put as much pressure on the shooter as you can, right? And we talk about kids at a youth level now that they're so good. Imagine now you go up to a 25-year-old guy who's played worldwide, and he's not taking that pressure on. He's saying, yeah, come on, let's do penalties, and I get to shoot from 12 yards away with no pressure, nobody in front of me. Like, this is gonna be a breeze. But you try and put as much pressure as you can on them, and then once you dive, once you pick your side after looking at video and doing tendencies and looking at all these things with the goalkeeping coach, with the other goalkeepers, you try and say, all right, if I think he's going to my right, and I'm going to go as hard as I can all the way out there. And if he goes that way, great. And maybe I make a save. But the other side of it is I could be diving that way and he's just going to pass the ball into the other side. And then it's like, well, that was silly of the goalkeeper. It was so obvious he was going to go the other way. And it's like, why would he dive that way? And it's like, well, okay. So yeah, it's you try and be in the moment, be present, and remind yourself, hey, you've studied everything you could possibly study. You've done everything you could possibly do to prepare yourself for that moment. And even that may not be enough, because in penalties, you certainly need a little bit of luck to.
That's got to be a
get on your side.
rush, though, man. When you're
Oh, it
sitting in
is,
front of
yeah.
80,
Save
and it's
one.
like everybody's watching this 12-yard span.
For sure. And if you come up with the goods, if
Oh,
you make a
it's
save,
huge.
it's like
Crazy.
you just feel like
You're
on
the
top of
man.
world. Yeah, like I'm getting pumped up right now talking about it. It's like
Yep.
that moment is like that's what you live for. It's like, yeah, like let's go.
Last question, we'll let you go, man. I know I appreciate it again. You've given, I feel like, great advice to the kids, to coaches and this, and even parents. But what would your advice to be to parents where they have sons or daughters, that they're letting their kids, just like you now, kind of build their own dream? What would your advice be?
My advice to them would be, let them find their path. Let their kids find their path that works for them, because I get asked that question all the time. And I don't have a secret recipe. I don't have a key to say, okay, hey, this is what you and your kid must do to play at the next level, to play professional. I get asked that question all the time at my kids' practices and whatnot. Oh, what should we do? Should we play this team or that team, or do this organization or that one? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't have the answer. I said, you need to make sure your kid loves the sport and is enjoying it and having fun. And two, do what works for your family, because, my family dynamic is going to be different than somebody with one kid who they can be here, there, everywhere. We can't do that, as a family. And, you try not to give these parents, I guess, too much, because then you feel like if I tell them to do this, they're going to go out and not only do this, but they're going to do that, and that. You know what I mean? They're going to do 10 times as much that you've already told them. And that's not going to be good for any kid, at least in my eyes. I think, you've got to find the pathway that works for you and your family. And most importantly, you need to allow your kid, boy or girl, to enjoy it. I talked about my son, but my daughter, she at an early age was like, Dad, the soccer thing, not for me. Like,
Yeah.
and I was like, awesome. I was like, no problem. And she does flips and cartwheels all around the house 24/7. And I'm like, yeah, soccer's definitely not for you. I'm like, you do you, whatever that looks like. And as long as they're having a good time, I'm not worried about the end goal of professional sports. I'm worried about the here and the now, and how is that affecting them within their friendships at school? How is that affecting them with their school and their grades? How is that affecting them? How are they affecting their teammates, being on a team sport? And that was the message, that I've always tried to push to them is how do you fit into a group? How do you fit into a team? And how do you become a good teammate? And if they're doing that, then that's all I care about.
Awesome, man. But we
advice.
started this episode talking about being a great teammate, and I think there it is at the end again, just the way you are with your teammates, a great teammate.
Yep. Yep. Thank you so much, Brad. I know you
Absolutely.
got a lot going
Really
on right
appreciate
now.
it.
We really appreciate it.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, and
Pleasure,
if you can
guys.
get
Appreciate
Brad on the field to meet Messi sometime, man, it'd be huge for us, and it would take a lot of
I'm
things
sure it's
off.
an easy thing to do.
it.
Yeah.
Not a problem. Well, after they threw me in the net, he owes me one.
Is
so.
that meme's a lot funnier after the win, though, right?
Yeah,
Correct,
exactly.
correct.
Now you got a good
100%.
story with it.
100%.
Well, good luck the rest of the way, man, the rest of
Appreciate
this
it.
year, and thank you for stopping by today, and go Clemson.
Love it. Thanks, guys.